I also think, men, we're being asked to talk more, but I also think that some men just don't know how to talk, because the beauty with vulnerability is it builds trust. And if the world wants men in particular to be vulnerable, we need each other together, and we need to create this symphony. And the one thing I always challenge women with is that when we are vulnerable, please don't use our own vulnerability against us one day down the line. Actually, when you ask a man to be vulnerable, and he is, that is not the time to shame him, that's the time to praise him.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Academy Podcast with the #1 international best-selling author and multi-award winning success and life coach, Kamil Shah. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking this opportunity to grow together with me, Kamil Shah, and my guests on this program. Each episode of the Academy Podcast is filled with insights and wisdom from my guests, which I believe can have a profound impact on the way we live our lives. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, my lovely people, and welcome back to another episode of the Academy Podcast with me, Kamil Shah. My hope is that this week brings you joy, happiness, and above all, peace. Now, you might be joining us today while you're on your commute, on your daily exercise, walking the dog, or simply chilling at home, okay? Whatever it is and wherever you are, I'm here to tell you that this episode is going to be a very special one and hopefully an insightful one for you guys out there, okay? You'll find out why in a minute. Joining me today is Mark Sephton. Mark is a personal mentor to entrepreneurs. His mission to help others has seen him break into global markets while working with startups and millionaire entrepreneurs around the world. Mark's love for entrepreneurship has been expressed through serving as podcast host for Brainz Magazine. When not on the mic, Mark is a regular contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine and a speaker for corporate events, entrepreneurship summits, and major conferences worldwide. His expertise in personal and professional development has positioned him as an expert in the industry, resulting in transformational experiences for audiences, clients, and businesses alike. Drawing from personal experiences, Mark has taken the essence of what he has experienced and built a business that helps draw out the magnificent potential that every person beholds, using his GPS system to highlight blind spots, efficiencies, and deficiencies. He is also the author of 3 personal development books titled Inside Job and Plot Twist, with his latest book, Mark of a Man, which came out in November 2021. Welcome, Mark.
Great to be here. I think, from such a long bio, I think I should probably have done less with my life, and then it would have made it a lot easier.
Awesome. It's all good, Mark. Again, for people tuning in out there, I'm absolutely honored and actually grateful to be connected with you, Mark. And it's through Brainz Magazine, through the magazine, through Brainz Magazine, through contributing to Brainz Magazine myself, got connected with you, and seeing you very active on Brainz, especially with the podcast. And so I think it's just been an absolute joy and great to see what you're doing right now. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, the feeling's very mutual, Kamil. You have a great reputation, and I love, even at the start of the podcast, you talk about how, you want to send peace to those that listen. I love that kind of heartfelt, sensitive side towards humanity that actually, I think with everything as human beings that we face, like, the world definitely needs peace. There's so much unrest and pain and struggle, and I just think, even this week, if I'm just reflective of my own week, how it's been a bit stressful, a bit difficult, and I'm thinking, I'm just one person out of billions that live on planet Earth. How much the Earth must be in pain at some point or another throughout, like, the days and the weeks, and this is why I think, when we say, be kind to each other because you don't know what somebody else is going through, I think that's is so right.
Absolutely. And what a great way to start there, Mark, to start with gratitude and just sending peace and positive energy to each other. And I think that's a great reminder. I love these conversations because I usually start off with that, but because it's become such a habit, I forget the power, and you've just reminded me of the simplicity of that power. So thank you for reminding me of that. As
Yeah, yeah.
simple as it sounds.
No, I know, but I think sometimes it is the simple things that actually are the most magical and profound. I think we live in a world that's all about who can make the most noise, that sometimes it's that silent voice that actually cuts across the noise. And that's why, when I hear thoughts like sometimes less is more, that really like rings true, because we live in such a busy world. Everybody wants our attention. I mean, there's so many podcasts, so many articles, there's so many coaches. It's like goodness. But it's like I find like it's the ones that reflect something a little deeper that actually tends to be the ones that I think have the greatest need in the world. And we have to remind ourselves that we are human beings, and there's certain things that as humanity we all go through, and it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how successful you are, it doesn't matter what you've achieved. We still go through pain and difficulty. We all experience loss, and it's something that we all need to be very mindful of and delicate with each other in particular.
It's a great reminder there, Mark. A couple of things I picked out there just immediately. We'll come to this in a minute because I want to come to your book, which is very interesting, the latest one, Mark of a Man. And I resonate with what you've just said there, because you're identifying the fact that we live in a digital age where everything's on demand, everything's quick. There's so many things, there's so much noise out there. And I think 10 years ago it was a different realm altogether, but things have just sped up so quickly that it's hard to maintain focus. And when you're unable to maintain focus, I think you lose sight of your own focus, your own self. How do you find your uniqueness now in such a busy world? And you've just touched on that there. And I think we'll come to the Mark of a Man in a minute, because I think that's a really powerful. I've read the synopsis of the book as well, and I think that's really powerful. What you've shared in the book. It's a personal experience and how you've used that to help others from your own personal experience. I think that's really powerful. So thank you for reminding us of that, Mark. Before we go to the book, I started off by telling folks out there that we got connected through Brainz Magazine, but there's a lot, as you mentioned, in the bio, there's a lot that's happened prior to that.
Yep.
So if you don't mind sharing with us your journey.
Yeah, I'll do my best to give the highlights. It's interesting, because I always believe that your gifting makes room for you. And I think that we're all on our own journey. I think this is very much at the essence of all that I am, is the fact that, Camille, you're up against you. You're not up against me, and I'm not up against you. I'm up against Mark Sephton, and we're all up against ourselves. And, I think that's something really important, that when people hear this, like, we all have our own journey, and there's certain things that I'll experience that other people won't, and there'll be experiences that other people have, and I never will. And I think that regardless of where we've come from, even the tough stuff can help shape us and bring us, to where we are now. And hopefully, as we move forward, we can gain better ground and fulfillment and make more of a difference in this life. And for me, if I take myself back to my childhood, I came from a broken family. My parents divorced when I was 8, so my childhood was a challenge, and my way of coping at that time is I comfort it. So put on quite a bit of weight, and the thing with kids, I mean, I love kids. I've got 3 beautiful children. I know you've got children as well that you adore, just like me. But also, kids can be cruel as well. And as a kid, I got bullied quite a lot for the size that I was, because I come for 8. It was the only way I could find escape through why my mum and dad were no longer together. And, I got called different names, like fatty and things like that. And I got bullied quite a bit, both physically and, emotionally and mentally. And I guess my childhood was a challenging one, and it wasn't until there was a teacher called Mr. Aldridge, and I write about this in my first book, Inside Job. He was about 6'6", and my school was predominantly a football, soccer based school, and I've always loved the game of football. Um, but he brought basketball to the school, and the reason I didn't really go for the football at the start was because some of my bullies were in that team, and I really just didn't like the attitude of some of the other classmates. But basketball drew a different crowd for me, and some of my friends would go to that, and it was every Friday after school. And I remember after maybe 6 weeks, like the weight started to pour off me, Camille, and that really did something for me, because obviously as the weight started to drop off, I started to find confidence. And I think after a few months, my teacher called us all round, said, I'm going to register our school into the school basketball team. And he said, and I want to name our captain. And to my surprise, he named me as the captain. And he said to me, Mark, he said, nobody has been more dedicated to these Fridays as you. You seem to have the respect of those around you, and seem to be a real valuable member. And for the first time in my life, Camille, I felt like somebody. I felt like I'd been seen. My childhood being one that I was bereft of confidence, and even at parents' evenings, some of my teachers would say to my mum and dad, I wish Mark was more like his more academic sister. My sister was always very academic, very conscientious, and they compared me to my sister. And so for the first time, a kid who, like I said, was bereft of confidence and really felt on the shadows, for the first time in my life, somebody saw a leader in me. And that's a big part, I think, of why I do what I do now, is because now I try to be unto others what Mr. Aldridge was to me. And that was to highlight and call out what I see in other people, to give them an opportunity to be able to beat a new drum, and create a different rhythm and play a different track, because I think narrative and what we tell ourselves really does hinder and liberate us depending on what we're saying. And so for me, like a big part of like my kind of like background, derived from that. And alongside that, in terms of the entrepreneurial heart within me, that was from pretty much my grandfather, who was a serial entrepreneur. He worked in jewelry and insurance and in hospitality. And when I was about 7 years old, he used to pick me up at 5 a.m. and we'd go and deliver fruit and vegetables to the local restaurant, pubs, and hotels.
Wow.
And it wasn't so much, Camille, that my grandfather sat me down and told me everything, but it was more what I witnessed from him that I learned. And I guess when I reflected over his life, that's when I really started to see that it had shaped and made an impression on me. Because when we'd go into a kitchen of a hotel, everybody loved seeing my granddad. Like, they would laugh and they would joke, and it just showed me that really the essence of business is to solve a problem, and the most important thing in business is your reputation. And my grandfather had a great one. They would cook him breakfast, and they used to cook me food as well, just as a part of duty of care, for the fact that my grandfather was the one that was producing. My grandfather was very good at hosting people as well. He used to have fancy dinners, and he used to be the king of hospitality. And that I always say to people, if you want to make £1 million, you've got to find a solution that affects 1 million people. You can always tell whether a business is scalable by how many people are affected by the solution that you bring to the table. In some ways, it seems very simple, apart from the fact that there isn't typically that many problems now that aren't being solved by other people. But it's certainly, if you kind of want to move away from a lifestyle business and actually make some serious wonga, then you really got to find a solution that affects a lot of people. So I think, my background wise, in terms of my schooling and then having an entrepreneurial like grandfather, is something that, really, I think shaped me. And, I actually went into hospitality and retail. I left school at 15 when I got my GCSEs. So I didn't drop out of school. That's just how our schooling system was. You had a choice of going to college, to do further education or go into work. And I actually went into work, and I only became a lover of learning at the age of 26. I think at the age of 26, I'd only ever read one book front to back, and I've become a lover of learning now. And think everything I've achieved, none of it came from the classroom. It's all come from my own experience and life. So for me, it was like once I'd started to build up the experience and realized that a lot of my work and strength came with working with people, because obviously retail and hospitality is some of the most customer facing experiences that you can have, and they're both very humble industries as well. I think working in hospitality is one of the most thankless jobs you can do, because literally some people do treat you like a slave. And the way some people used to speak to me, it's like, I learned the act of service. I learned about not forgetting where you come from, because it really annoys me, Camille, where people get a bit of success and they forget where they came from. So I've always kept myself humble, in the sense of, even if I've achieved something, I always remember where I came from, and I believe in showing respect and being kind as much as I can be. Of course, I'm human, so there's going to be times where I probably haven't demonstrated that. And I think that based on where I am now, and obviously, if you do feel like there's gaps in there, I'm trying to keep it in sync as possible, because obviously I'm mindful of time. Then I'm happy to answer any questions. But I'd say that between like my experiences, my grandfather, having a love of people, and then I did a series of diplomas. I did a life coaching diploma and did some business and leadership training. And when I first started my first business, it was a hospitality consultancy business, where I took my retail and hospitality experience, and then I worked with independent restaurant, pub and hotel owners of how to improve customer service, how to improve operational flow, and all that good stuff. And then I pivoted, working specifically with entrepreneurs, and created my GPS system, which came out of about 3 years of working with creatives and entrepreneurs, and really reflecting on the organic conversations and pain points that I would have with those individuals, and decided to create something that would basically check on the health of somebody's behaviors, their actions, and their beliefs, based on just the organic conversations of what I'd been historically having with others. And that's why I call it my GPS. It's kind of like an internal MRI. It really shows people where they're at. And then it's through that where I really focus my mentoring and my coaching. But I'm in a privileged position where I do a number of things that I love: podcasting, emceeing and keynoting events, writing books and articles. I've been writing for Entrepreneur Magazine for 8 years, and I guess, that's just a quick whistle stop, if you like.
Awesome. That's so that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Mark, because literally I've just picked out. So I've got my notepad here next to me, and I'm just jotting away. There's so much in there, but I'm picking out the key things. Literally, I can just write a whole, article on this, because there's so much in there. The first thing that I picked out, right? The first thing I picked out was the fact that we need to show up. And you've mentioned it there. You mentioned about the first time that you felt that you gained the confidence was when you were selected to be the captain. And that was, your teacher said it's because you showed up. You showed up consistently. And I think that's the key thing about, if you're listening to this, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're a budding entrepreneur, you want to start something up, or you want to improve yourself, develop new habits, showing up is the first thing. I think you've just nailed it right there, right from the word go. Showing up is the key thing, because I always say this: 99% people don't. There's only 1% of people that actually show up, and it's the 1% that actually have that opportunity to see results because they actually showed up in the first place.
Like, when we hear the word show up, like, it's kind of twofold. First of all, we show up for others so that we become reliable and we're consistent and people can depend on us. Because I mean, there's so many flakes and so many people that say they'll be there and they're not. But actually, the biggest kicker is the fact that you show up for you.
Mm,
It's like you got to show up for you. It doesn't matter whether you've got an audience. It doesn't matter whether people think you're amazing. It doesn't matter whether you get praise. You show up for you. You have to show up for yourself. I have to show up for me. I have to show up for Mark Sephton every day,
mm.
regardless of whether I get praise, regardless of whether I get results. We've all got to have a bit of pride and we've got to take ownership.
Absolutely, and I think that's critical as well. I mean, that's fundamentally showing up for yourself, because if you want to start anything, you want to improve yourself, you can't rely on, there are external factors, but you need to be there. You need to be part of that equation from the word go. And like you're saying, it's not about the validation of others. I always say this, I started off being that, I needed to be validated by others, but now I'm saying, no, actually, I'm happy to do what I do, and I need to show up for myself. Exactly the same way that you've mentioned there. If I don't believe in myself, I can't expect others to believe in me,
Yeah,
because I need to believe in myself first. And that's fundamental.
exactly. And we can't escape ourselves. So I mean, there's only two for me. There's only two influences that are consistent throughout our life, and that is the fact that we're always in our own company. And for me, believing in God, I believe God is there at every moment too. And those two, between God and yourself, like, you're always going to be there, which is another reason why we have to keep improving ourselves and doing the work and being vulnerable, which is a lot of what Mark of a Man is about, is the fact that we have to show up for ourselves, and we have to remind ourselves that we are with ourselves every single moment. So why wouldn't
Absolutely.
you strengthen yourself? Why wouldn't you give your best self the chance to show yourself self-love, to be your biggest cheerleader, to be your own best friend? Like, it's crucial, because you could put me in jail, and you know I'm still with self, and we've got to remember the importance of our relationship with ourself is so critical.
Absolutely. And I just got reminded of a conversation that I've had recently about this particular topic. And um, even to the idea of, we talk about how we treat our bodies, this physical thing that we have here. Now we're kind of venturing into other things, like, how we treat our, bodies in terms of what we consume, not only food, but also what we put in our minds, what we read, what we listen to, who we surround ourselves with. All of it affects our self. And I think that's really critical to point out as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I can share a personal experience that when I turned 40, I had, some annual blood work done, and some of my pointers I wasn't happy with, and I thought, well, the man that's got me into this position is me. I'm the one who decides what I put into my mouth. I'm the one who decides how much or how little I exercise. I was a bit disappointed with myself at the start, and then I thought, well, the same man that got me there is the same man that can get me out of there.
Mm.
And the last 3 months, I've literally gone guns blazing, ditched a load of weight. I'm the fittest I've ever been, and I've taken ownership. And the thing is when it's on me, I will always show up, and I'll always deliver. I find my biggest frustration is when I have to depend on other people for results. But
Mm.
each of us can only do out of what we have the ability to control. It's so important that we frame things the right way.
Absolutely. I want to come to a couple of other things that you've mentioned, which I think is really critical. You then talk about your grandfather being the entrepreneur that he was, and his influence on you in terms of your formative years of going into entrepreneurship. And one thing I picked out was the duty of care, of how people warmed to him and treated him because of his duty of care to others. And I think now we're talking about, yes, we show up for ourselves, we have duty of care to ourselves. Now we're talking about how do we treat others, how do we affect others. and that influence. And I think I don't know your grandfather personally, but I'm assuming he's a great guy. He loves himself, because I think that's how you can project this love and care to others, because you are yourself. You give yourself self-love, and he enjoys what he does. I'm assuming. I don't know. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, but I'm assuming because he has that positive influence on his own self first, that he's able to give that duty of care to others.
Yeah, I mean, he actually passed away when I was 18, Camille. So that
Right. Sorry to hear.
yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, he he moved on like 22 years ago, and but the interesting is the one thing that he had that my father has and that I have is a real great sense of humor and that kind of joyful disposition,
Mm.
and in terms of having a duty of care to others, my grandfather did many things that other people didn't know until actually he died. Even his own wife didn't know that he actually bought the two maternity incubators for premature babies at the local hospital. Like that was something that he did out of his own
Wow.
pocket, and
Wow.
even his own wife didn't know that, and
Mm.
like that doesn't surprise me. And even though I feel like I got to know my grandfather, like probably in the last 3 weeks of his life, when I was starting to visit him in the hospital, and I think I got to know him more in those 3 weeks than I had in the other 18 years. But that was something that really shone through. He had such a great reputation, and like I said, like I think the greatest asset we have in business is our reputation. And once that's gone, then you're not going to stay in business for long.
Mm. I think it's really, really great that you've brought that up. I think I've just got reminded about how do we honor people that have passed, is to I guess, to carry on the influence that they've had on us. So the fact that I'm hearing this story about your grandfather, I'm moved by this, and I actually, you know I'm inspired to do the same, to do things, the small things that, you don't do daily, but will have an impact on other people, and you're not even wanting to get credit from it. You know, I just got reminded as well, from the Muslim community or the Islamic community, we always talk about giving charity. And there's a saying that, give charity with the right hand, such that even the left hand doesn't know that the right hand is giving. So almost to say that, do these small acts of kindness, not in a showy off way, but, to just do it, and not even mention it, because, it doesn't need to be mentioned, but it's the legacy that lasts, that it was going to affect people and influence people later on down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with my grandfather, it's interesting because he was a flight engineer for a Lancaster bomber in World War II, and uh, whenever I share this story, I always get kind of like goosebumps because he was one of the few that was told to carry on bombing over Germany at the time, and um, after he'd done that, he really needed the bathroom, and he said to the pilot, can I go? And he got clearance, so he went. And where he used to sit was like in the turret where they had like the guns at the bottom of the aircraft. And when he came back from the bathroom, that place where he'd been sitting for the last 7 or 8 hours was covered in bullet holes. Like he would have
Oof.
died.
Wow.
And whenever I think of like stuff like that, and then think, well, if he'd have gone, I wouldn't be here.
Mm.
Then you just understand like the preciousness of life and the timing of life, and how we shouldn't take anything for granted. But the moral of the story is it does matter when you go for a pee.
Absolutely. Don't hold it in, especially when you're at, well, I don't know how old you are, but at my age, don't hold it. You don't want to hold it in. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, but I think you're right in saying, I mean, it's just one of those things, life it's just stories like that. It's just a reminder of how precious our time is, right?
Absolutely.
And, reflecting on the times that I've taken it for granted, my early years, thinking, oh yeah, got time. But now you're thinking, well, it is precious and it does matter what I do. Yeah,
Exactly. It does.
absolutely. So the next thing is we talk about self-development, your journey into self-development that you're saying, it wasn't until your mid-20s that you actually started to invest in your personal development and start to read and learn and translate that into teaching, into starting up your own consultancy. And I think that's a really important thing to bring up as well, the role of self-development. And it's never too late. I keep saying to people, for me, it was only until the past few years, up until my just before 40s, that I actually start to kind of really go into personal development, because for the past 30 years I've been asleep. Not asleep in such in a way, but I'm picking up things, but I haven't really kind of really gone into, okay, I've got gained these not this the skills and knowledge, but what do I do with it? So it's that awakened state hasn't happened. So I think self-development is really important, and to tell people out there, it doesn't matter what stage of your life you're in, what season of your life you're in, you can still start now to learn and invest in yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? How, like I already talked about, how Mr. Aldridge was a significant point, and the trigger for me with the self development was coming across a lady called Danny Johnson, and everything she was saying was groundbreaking. I mean, we hear the things that she was saying back then all the time now, like the greatest place to invest is in yourself, and that sort of language. But like, 15 years ago, I'd never heard that, and I was like, who is this woman? Like, she's really speaking like in a different way. And the only thing I was bummed out about with the whole like interview was the fact that she's in the States. And then she said at the very end, me and my husband Hans were coming to London, England, for the first time, and it was one of those moments where it was like, yeah, it was a lot of money, and it was like, but then it was also, I can't afford not to go. And I was working at Warwick Castle at the time, which is one of the greatest castles in the UK, and I was working in the hospitality there. And my boss said to me, he said, "What are you doing this weekend?" I said, "Actually, I'm going to London to a first steps to success conference with Danny Johnson." And he was like, "What, you paid for that yourself?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you staying in a hotel?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "I'm going to pay for the hotel for you." Because
Wow.
he was so impressed that I was developing myself and investing in myself, that he wanted to support me. And actually, again, I write that in Inside Job too, because I'm a big believer that when somebody does you right, then you do them right too, and I believe in honoring those that honor you, and all that good stuff. And so for me, she was like the catalyst, and it was at that conference where I really just it was like the penny drops, a piece of the puzzle was missing. I realized that if I wanted the marketplace to pay more for me, then I had to have a skill that demanded a greater price from the marketplace. For example, a brain surgeon will take 7 years of study before they even get to operate, right? Which then means that they get top whack because the level of education they need demands a higher fee. So I thought, well, I was in hospitality, and I was earning around £30,000 at the time, and it was kind of like the ceiling at that point of how much I wanted to earn. And really, it was like, if I want to earn more, then what I offer the marketplace has to be of greater value. And so that really made sense to me. And then I thought, well, the only way that I can demand and require more from the marketplace is for me to develop my skill, which has a higher value to it, which was how and when my whole personal development journey started. And that's really how it kind of just flew from there.
That's a great story, and thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much to pick up from there. Something that I picked out was, the starting point is yourself. This to have that self-awareness that I if I want to raise myself, I have to invest in myself, and that's the first and foremost. And second thing you mentioned about the people that support you, There will be the one or two people that will, some people will not, that's fine, but pick out the ones who, like you're saying, honor the ones who actually support you at the beginning of your journey. Similarly in business, your first customers, I always get reminded of the first customers that, or clients, whoever it is, these are the first people that actually trusted you from the start. And I think it's honoring these people and always reminding yourself of these people. And I think you come back to that. You mentioned about mentioning that particular story in the book itself, and I think that's really critical as well to get reminded and reflect on that as part of your early journeys to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And I come to the reflection as well. We talked about reflection, so yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Mark, we're coming up to halfway, actually just gone past halfway. I actually want to bring in, we talked about the inside job. I want to bring in Mark of the Man. I know you've got the other book, Plot Twist. Maybe in another episode, we can cover your books, the other two books. But in this particular episode, I want to bring in Mark of the Man, because that's the latest book that you had. I've seen the book launch, and I think you've done some live book launches as well. I think Barnes and Nobles. I've seen. Is that right? Barnes and Nobles.
Yes, Barnes and Nobles, Waterstones. I mean, it's every major like book outlet, regardless of where you are in the world. As well as Amazon and all those good places.
Amazing. And the synopsis of the book is you reflect on your own, and you share a lot of your personal life in there, especially when it comes to identifying yourself. For example, me being a man, and how do I place myself in this particular day and age? And I think that's something that's not talked about enough. Now again, I'm reflecting on my own journey of where I am now, and I think a lot of my early influences of how I should behave as not only a human being, but also as as a boy, a teenager, but now as a man. There are certain influences early on that have shaped me, the way that I should behave, and the way that I should expect the opposite sex to behave. And I think you cover that in the book, not only from a man's perspective, but also from the other perspective, as the opposite sex, women. How do they perceive, or how do they expect a man to behave, or the expectations on both sides? If you don't mind sharing a little bit about the book.
Be happy to. I mean, the essence of Mark of a Man is really to help men become better men. I talk a lot about how to express our energy as men, and how to understand the emotions that we experience as men, and the expectations that I believe that we should all have as men. And there's a number of reasons why I wrote Mark of a Man. I mean, I've always found writing cathartic and healing. So from my own kind of like self-healing point of view, whenever I write, I heal. So there's definitely that element. The other element was the fact that and while it isn't for divorced men, but I do use some of the lens of what I talk about through my own divorce, because there's a lot of stuff there for women in terms of support groups, magazines, literature, but there isn't a lot there for men. And I find that relationally, men do tend to get the bad press, and some of that's justified. But with anything, it always takes two to make something work, and two to make it not work, and whether one is right and one is wrong really is a joint effort. Even those that have an affair that obviously isn't right, there's also a reason why people have affairs, and it's not like you just decide one day, you know what, I'm going to go and cheat, and there's often a breakdown of needs being met, or whatever. And sometimes I think we have to be a little more humble in terms of how we address things. So I really wanted to create a discussion and around masculine and feminine energy. How is it as men do we need to show up in order for women to show up? Because the world's gone mad. You have two sides of the coin. You have feminists, and then you have bigots. And the problem is I believe in equality, Camille, in terms of if a man and woman do the same job, they should absolutely be paid the same. So I absolutely believe in that sort of equality.
Mm,
However, do I believe men and women are equal? No, we have beautiful differences. There's some things that women do that men just need to get out of the way and let the woman, lead. And then there's some things that the women really need to get off our back and let that man lead and be who he needs to be. But
mm,
we've created such a storm in society. We've forgotten the order of what I believe God created man and woman to be and how we should function. And when it functions well, it really creates a symphony. And so I do talk about some of those things as well. But fundamentally, as a man, I'm challenging men in terms of their behavior and how we see women in particular. Because some of the conversations I hear, while I'm out about women are not pleasant. And I think I'm more sensitive to it now because of the fact I've got two daughters. Whenever I look at a woman, I always think you are somebody else's daughter, and that always seems to keep, a point of reference for me. I also think, men were being asked to talk more, but I also think that some men just don't know how to talk. And I've never been
mm,
afraid to be vulnerable because the beauty with vulnerability is it builds trust. And then when you have trust, that's when you can really make a difference and influence people. If you think of influence, the people that influence me the most are those that I love or those that I know that love me. You think of your children, your wife, your parents. The reason why they can influence you so much is because of love. It's because of trust. And if the world wants, men in particular to be vulnerable, the one thing I always challenge women with is that when we are vulnerable, please don't use our own vulnerability against us one day down the line. Because I've seen that too. When a man opens up and then a woman will use that against him. And yet women are dying and screaming for men to be more empathetic, to be more vulnerable. So I'm kind of calling on women that actually, when you ask a man to be vulnerable, and he is, that is not the time to shame him. That's the time to praise him, because for me, we need each other together and we need to create this symphony and really like mark of a man. Yes, I get vulnerable because of the fact that that's the way I'm really going to make a difference is by sharing my own truth. The fact that, yeah, I was the one that ended my marriage, and yet every day for 6 months, I cried myself to sleep because it's not fundamentally what I wanted. My family is riddled with divorce. I wanted to be the first one that kind of broke that and didn't, and there's reasons around that as to why, but I think it's really important that as men in particular, we take responsibility and we start being what this world needs a man to be, which is to be masculine, which looks like providing psychological safety as well as physical safety for children and women to thrive, to not to ridicule, to not like look at them as like a piece of meat, to really create a space where they feel safe and feel valued and appreciated. And, I think sometimes a man has to hear it from another man, and
mm.
sometimes a woman has to hear it from another woman. And there's a load of reasons why I wrote Mark of a Man, but fundamentally it is to help men process, but it's also to challenge men as well as challenging myself. I don't write it from a pedestal. I write it through my own struggles, my own fumblings, my own vulnerability, in the hope that if I help and rescue one man, if I can show one man how to journey out of the pain of his soul, because I've always said, Camille, the most difficult journeys that we face as human beings is the one that passes through the heart. They're the ones
Mm.
that are the most intricate, the most painful, the most delicate, and that's fundamentally it. And obviously, we could go deeper and longer, but yeah, that's the crux.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Mark. I mean, I'm just even reflecting on my own journey. Myself. Being a man that I am now, have been influenced by earlier upbringing and what I've seen in my surroundings growing up. How not only to be told how I should behave, but also what I see in my surroundings. And I emulated what I saw. The old saying monkey see, monkey do, and you don't know any better, and you think this is how you should operate as as a man. And I had to learn it the hard way, broken relationships early on, and it wasn't until I reflected on why did all of this happen, and I was actually going through self-reflection, and possibly it's what I'm doing and how I'm operating, and I didn't really question what I was doing because I thought this is how I should operate.
Mm.
And it wasn't until having conversations, actually being, like you're saying, being vulnerable about my own feelings, how I feel. Up until then it was just harboring it in, that growing up, you being told to just suck it up, and just suck it up and keep going, suck it up and keep going. You're not encouraged to share your feelings. You shouldn't cry.
Mm.
And those are the things that have been pent up, and what you're doing is amazing, fantastic. I really applaud you for doing that, Mark. And I think just giving that voice or opportunity to other men as well, to allow themselves to be vulnerable, and to share what they have.
Absolutely. There's nothing more beautiful than when you see a man just be really real,
Yeah.
and just show, like, even today, like on Facebook, I posted a vulnerable post, and I've had loads of like comments on it, and one lady in particular said, Mark, you're one in a billion that actually shares their own vulnerability as a man, and women appreciate that, and like I said, that's the only way we're going to go deeper. And when we talk about reflections, and it reminds me, we're both fathers, myself and you, and you'll agree with this definitely. Our children are mirrors, and we're talking about how
Mm,
we tend to mirror and tend to reflect that which we've experienced and been exposed to. And I remember my son one time, he just always tests the boundaries, like always asks why, like, and it was really frustrating me.
mm,
And then I reflected on it. I thought, well, he's got that from you, Mark, because you're always testing the boundaries. You're always
mm,
seeing what you can get away with. You're always,
mm,
persisting. And I laughed in the end. And I thought, he's just being what I've shown him to be. And sometimes that's quite humbling. Um,
mm,
there was a time when I used to say to my children, there's no such thing as can't. And I remember one time, it was a few years ago, I was doing something, got in a conversation with my eldest, and I said the words I can't, and she challenged me and she said, Dad, there's no such thing as can't. She just got me good, and I was just like, well, then I've done my job properly, in the sense you've created a culture now that actually will hold you up in those moments of vulnerability and doubt, because you've created an atmosphere which really encourages everybody to kind of have an idea of the higher road. So yeah, great.
Thank you for sharing that. I've got tears in my eyes already. just feeling it, feeling the love, man. It's just great to hear these stories, and I'm getting a bit a bit emotional. It's just because I reflect on this, similar to you, the fact that you mentioned it early on. You said that whatever's happened, I'm just paraphrasing, whatever's happened in the past, you don't need to be able to you don't need to repeat that again. You're able to craft your own journey, and the fact that you're doing this with your kids, we're you know um challenging previous upbringing, and we're crafting our own experiences with the our kids, the younger generation, whatever it is, the people that we're connected with. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's good that you say that, because that was one of the reasons why it took me a long time before I actually made the decision that my marriage had reached the end, because of how crippling my own parents' divorce was on my childhood, and how I really couldn't stomach the fact of my kids going through that. And so, in some ways, because of my own experience, I was able to protect them from a lot of the things that, I guess just naturally I got caught up in. And again, my story didn't have to be the same as my children's, and because of my story being what it was, actually, I was able to really protect them, not from everything, because I don't think it's possible, because obviously divorce is sad, and it is devastating for those that aren't even the ones that are initially affected. It has a ripple effect, so it is what it is. But it doesn't have to be. I'm always saying, I'm always mindful when people say, Mark, what happened when this happened to you? And I always say, well, this is my story, but it doesn't need to be yours, because too often I think we jump on somebody else's story, and it prevents us, or actually it makes us do things that we wouldn't naturally do. So we do have to hold that lightly, the fact that we can create our own story, and it doesn't have to be the same as somebody else's.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Great reminder. There's so much in there, Mark. Time's just flown by, and we're just coming up to the hour mark. I think we can just keep talking. I'm loving this conversation. There's so much in there. Like I said, hopefully we can do this again. Because I think when we share stories, it works both ways. Even for me, when you're sharing your story, I'm reflecting on mine, and there's so much energy and exchange between us, and I think that will be beneficial for people tuning in out there. That like, yes, we are sharing our stories, but reflect on your own story, and how can you make that change, whatever it is, in influence. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as ours, but it's what we're saying is that reflection, your own reflection of your own journey. So that's fundamental
Mm-hmm. It is.
to understand. Thank you so much, Mark. As before we move on, a couple of things. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, well, my website's marksephton.com. So nice and easy, marksephton.com. And then all my social media, like handles, are all connected to that, and very active on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So you can find me there. That's probably going to be the best way. Yep.
Okay, cool. And we'll include all the handles, social media handles, and website details in the description in this episode. So go ahead and connect with Mark after this. Okay. Another thing, how can people get a copy of Mark of the Man?
Yeah. So I mean, like online, it's on Amazon, both .com, .co.uk, and anywhere that does Amazon, people can get it. But they can also get it from, as we said, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, Book Utopia. I mean, it's everywhere. So you can definitely get it. It's available on Kindle and paperback. Mark of a Man.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mark. Okay, as usual, in keeping with the tradition of this podcast, we have the quick 5 question round. Now, I asked you, Mark, at the beginning if you wanted to know what they were, but you said nope, keep it to the end, which is fine. So we'll go with the quick 5 question round. Are you okay to do this, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited.
Don't worry, the questions are quite simple. So we'll go with question number 1. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, I think, even though I don't necessarily like the meaning of it, but I just like the sound of it, is the word obtuse.
that I'm just transported back to maths, obtuse angle, right?
Only when I hear it, it takes me to the film Shawshank Redemption.
Ah, right.
I remember when he's in the office, and he says to the sergeant who's corrupt, he's like, "Why are you so obtuse?" It just always. I mean, there's a couple of other words as well that I love, like concur. I love the word concur, and then I love the word bombardier as well. So
wow.
You got 3 for 1 there.
Awesome. Love that. Love that. Okay. So question number 2, what are you currently reading or listening to?
Oh, that's good. I am currently reading a book called Grit by Amy Duckworth, which is all obviously about resilience and perseverance, which I've always found fascinating. I think resilience is a word that I identify with myself. So it is an interesting topic for me. So really enjoying that. And in terms of listening, um, I was listening recently to Tim Ferriss's podcast. I really like some of his relationship ones. I like the premise of, the fact that him and his partner, they have these quarterly like check-ins where they go away for a weekend, so it does have a romantic spin to it, but they have a series of check-ins of how they feel the relationship is doing, which I really like, the
Mm,
essence of that. So yeah.
amazing. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So, question number 3. What is the worst advice you've ever received?
Fake it till you make it.
Mm,
I mean, if you want me to elaborate, I actually wrote an article on Entrepreneur Magazine called "Why Not to Fake It Till You Make It." Because the thing for me is, I'm flying the flag for authenticity. So this is where I'm coming from in the context of me challenging this phrase "fake it till you make it." Because the problem is that, especially in the coaching industry, it's not regulated. I really feel like it needs to be, because it's like, somebody loses their dad, they can now like coach people on how to deal with, mourning the death of a loved one. Like for me, it has that weakening effect of where is the actual depth, and knowledge. So this idea of, people saying yes to things they have no right to say means that the industry suffers too, because it ends up getting a negative reputation for somebody who does a half baked job. And I know that obviously, people have also said, say yes to everything, because just find a way. But for me, I really believe in staying in your lane. And so the worst advice that I was ever given was fake it till you make it. I'd rather be authentic, do what I'm actually set out and capable of doing, and doing it in a way where actually I'm going to give the person who's consuming my content or working with me the justification for the money that they're investing in my knowledge and in my mind. So that would be it for me.
great explanation. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. On the flip side, Mark, what is the best advice you've ever received?
I think say what you do and do what you mean. So I think that for me, the greatest advice is if you say you're going to do something, do it. I think if on social media in particular, we portray one kind of side of us, but do we demonstrate that behind closed doors? And I think at times we all fall on our own sword there, Camille, because I think there is times where we may portray a certain image, but then do we deliver on that? In our closed doors where nobody else can see but our partner or our children. You know, but for me, the greatest advice has to be the fact that both what you portray and what you say marries up with reality. Um, because for me, like I said, reputation is the most important. And I think that, if you're going to make a difference, if you want people to follow you, if you want to have influence, if you want to affect lives, you've got to show that you are a man or woman of your word, that you're reliable, and that you're going to go the distance. And for me, that's critical.
Awesome. Amazing. I resonate with that as well. So much in the authenticity, to be authentic, to show up. And yeah, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mark, last question. What can we expect from Mark in the next 5 years?
For me, I will never stop growing, and I'll never stop learning. And it's interesting how the more that we know, the less that we realize we know. And when we feel like we're enlightened, we realize that there's more enlightening that needs to be done. And so over the next 5 years, you'll continue to see me grow and expand, continue to see me continue with that self work, to keep showing up, to keep being available, to keep a positive but real and human, voice. I do care about people, and I enjoy the opportunity that I've been given to do what I love and when I want to do it. But it's that sense of, just me continually growing and helping other people grow with me so that we can all win and we can all flourish. A rising tide lifts all boats.
I love that. Thank you for painting that picture. And I'm really excited for this for the next couple of years for you, Mark. And I really sending you my energy, my everything, goodwill, thoughts, everything for you to achieve this.
Same.
Amazing,
Absolutely.
man. Okay. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today with Mark. This has been the Academy Podcast with Mark Sephton. I truly hope that you guys tuning in find this episode really insightful. I have personally enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you too, Mark.
Absolutely, yeah. Loved it.
Amazing. Like I said, hopefully we can do this again, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and peace and love from us always. Until the next episode, it's goodbye from me for now, and from Mark.
Yep. Goodbye and thank you.
Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in from wherever you are. My sincere hope is that this episode has not only resonated with you, but also given you some invaluable tips and strategies to improve your life. Don't forget to share your comments with me. As you know, I love to hear your views. Also, remember to follow the Academy, follow me, my guests, and tag us on our social media handles, which will be provided in the description. Most importantly, please leave a review and let me know that you've heard this podcast and how it has impacted you. Until the next episode, stay safe, stay healthy, and peace and love from me always.